When it comes to practicing piano, you might wonder how slow is slow enough. I would like to propose to you that 60 beats per minute is probably slow enough. Why 60? Because 60 beats per minute is generally slow enough to deal with most of the issues that are going to come up in your practice, and you will rarely need to go below this, so it's a good floor. It's also very easy to remember, and it's easy to feel without a metronome. 60 beats per minute is the equivalent to 1 beat per second, and so if you've ever kept track of seconds before, or if you can see the second hand on an analog clock, you can quickly estimate how 60 beats per minute should feel to play. And I'm sure those of you who are stateside will appreciate this. You can reference a certain state when you're counting, and it'll help you judge how fast a second is. So I'm sure you know the state. It's 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, right? I have my metronome here. Here's 60. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi. It's pretty reliable. By the way, this is the app Modus. This app has parity with the metronome in Fourscore, which is the app that I use for my iPad for sheet music. And I like the consistency for the metronome on this and the metronome that's built into that app. I like that parity. And also, I like a really simple metronome. I want an on-off button and a number for the BPM. So if you're looking for a really simple app, that's what I recommend. Not sponsored or anything. It's just what I prefer personally. By the way, whenever we need to go slower than 60, we can usually subdivide. This means that we're going to break each beat down into smaller divisions, and we'll count those instead. We are going to talk more about this in another video. The reason that I wanted to make this video is because I've noticed that 60 beats per minute is quite a bit slower than most beginners want to go. They tend to be much more comfortable around 90 or so, especially before we start seeing a lot of eighth notes and triplets and 16th notes. While 90 might feel slow when you're only dealing with quarter notes and half notes, it's generally too fast to be learning things that have independent parts in each hand or paying attention to important musical details, especially on first pass, and especially before you have actually learned a particular piece, right? We want to distinguish between learning and practicing. And when you are not at that practicing stage and you're trying to be, and you're trying to do it too fast, it's really not going to stick. And certainly it's way too fast to be dealing with eighth notes and triplets and 16th notes. And I'm going to give you a quick example of that. When we think of speed at the piano, or really in music, of course you can think of increasing the tempo, right? Increasing the BPM, the beats per minute. But you can also multiply the pulse by 2, 3, or 4. This is where eighth notes and triplets and 16th notes come in, right? So if I'm playing at 60 and I'm playing one note, like let's pretend there's a quarter note, one note against that 60, I'll just play a scale. That's how fast it would be, which is uncomfortably slow for a lot of people. Okay? However, in order to go 2 times that speed or 3 times that speed or 4 times that speed, it's important that you can at least play it at that speed, right? So here's 2 times that speed for the eighth note. So 2 against 1. Okay, here's 3 against 1, triplet. Okay, and 4 against 1 for the 16th note. Okay, so now I'm playing 4 times 60, which is way faster, even though that's not particularly fast, but that's way faster than a beginner is typically going to be able to conceive of. And so it's really not a matter of just increasing your metronome until the max tempo and hitting like 200 or whatever it goes to. You know, it stops at a certain number for a reason, because it's useless to feel the pulse that fast. Instead, we want to multiply that pulse. And in order to multiply the pulse, we have to have a baseline starting pulse that is particularly slow. Also, speaking of slow, I want to give you another example using some sheet music. So this is a piece that I give students in level 2 of my classical piano program. And so that's about like midway through the beginner phase. And it just has eighth notes and quarter notes. It's not particularly hard, but I use this piece to judge a student's ability to coordinate and have different articulations in the hand. So you can see the first line here, it's just unison parts. And of course, I am playing much faster than 60, and this is what a beginner is going to be tempted to do. But what happens when we get here? there's a lot of details there. There's a lot of things going on in each hand. Of course, somebody who's more experienced than this is going to find this like totally sight readable. I understand that. But this, for a true beginner, this is actually a challenging piece. And they're going to miss those details on that left hand. So if I slow this down to 60 and I keep my staccatos nice and short, you're going to be able to hear what I'm looking for in terms of that contrast. So that's a quick example. And I love this piece for that reason. It's actually very, very helpful to quickly determine how well a student's coordination is set up. Very interestingly, beginner students often attempt to play as fast as they can, and they regularly run into what sort of feels like a speed wall. However, it really isn't a speed wall that they need to worry about, at least not at this stage. It's actually a speed floor. If a speed wall represents the exact tempo where we can't really play any faster, the speed floor is going to be the opposite. It's going to be the tempo where we can't really hear the pulse or feel it or judge it or whatever, anticipate it any slower. And so if you've ever had any issues getting your fingers to cooperate or playing smoothly with both hands, your speed floor being too high is probably the issue. And this is actually a much bigger problem than not being able to play fast enough because it prevents students from getting traction in their music. Additionally, many students who can't feel a slow pulse tend to have a lot of tension when they play. They don't let things go. They don't let their muscles go. And this sort of tension is audible to an experienced teacher. So we can generally pick up on the fact that a student might have this sort of tension by just listening to them attempt a legato passage. I don't even need to see it. In fact, in my classical piano program, I have a place where students can, beginner and intermediate students, can upload recordings of pieces and exercises that I give them. And I generally review these recordings on pretty much a daily basis. So it's like hundreds and hundreds of recordings. It's a huge amount of stuff. So I get a lot of sampling of how beginners tend to play. And if I hear this sound where it's like, right? Like that's fast enough, it's even enough, you know, but it's not legato. It's not legato because I'm not using arm weight. I'm not really connecting. It's not that. So I don't even need to see the student. I know exactly what I'm going to see if I hear that. And usually what I see is this. I see the low wrist and I see, you know, it's just too fast, the low wrist and everything. Nothing's relaxed. Nothing has time to relax. And I know, oh man, that's definitely what we have to fix. I start to suspect all of this is going on. The speed floor being too high, the lack of slow practice, probably the lack of metronomic practice anywhere near the tempo that we should be playing at. So I felt like that was worth mentioning because, you know, a good teacher doesn't even need to see. We can hear that these issues are present. We can hear these habits in your playing. So if you are a beginner or intermediate student, I would very much like to encourage you to use a metronome in your practice and spend some time trying to push the speed floor down to 60. The best place for this is on any passage that you find challenging or difficult or awkward. However, you can do this on your key-based exercises. So like if you're doing pentascales, and you want to explore 60, you can still do a 2-to-1 pulse. You don't have to play 1-to-1. If you play 1-to-1, it's like, which is very slow, right? And it's good for you to be able to do this sometimes, right? But we can double this at least. And now it feels a lot better. Yet we're still getting that exposure to 60. As long as you're getting some exposure to the slow tempo, you're going to be able to claim the benefits. What are the benefits, you might ask? Well, first, you're going to have a higher chance of working out difficult passages and making your rhythms proportional. You're going to be more likely to observe important musical details. And probably most importantly, you're going to be able to develop a nice relaxed technique, or you're going to be more likely to develop a relaxed technique with a very flexible wrist, which means you're going to be more likely to play with arm weight and play and find that sensation very reliably, which is what we should all be doing most of the time. And it's also worth mentioning that slow and consistent practice greatly aids the learning process. So, you know, it has a huge amount of benefit and not much cost. By the way, I'm not saying to play everything at 60. Please don't think that I'm telling you play everything at 60, spend a huge amount of time playing at 60. Obviously, it's very slow. I certainly don't want you practicing entire pieces at 60 unless like they're supposed to go at 60. And you don't even really need to use the metronome all the time. I'm not advocating for any of this. I'm just wanting you to have some exposure and have it regularly. and so that you can develop your ability to play this slow and become comfortable with it. And the same holds true for faster playing, but again, we'll talk about that in a different video. So I hope you find this advice helpful. If there's anything that you would like to add, or if you are an experienced pianist and you have some suggestions for becoming more comfortable with this type of practice, feel free to leave a comment below. Anyway, that's it for this video, and I will see you again soon.